Good afternoon and welcome to the PlanIt webinar series. My name is Anna Bessel and I will be facilitating the webinar today. This is the third event in the 2016 Basics webinar series. PlanIt is the Council's effort to provide educational opportunities for the 2040 Comprehensive Plan update process. PlanIt not only includes the webinar series, but also involves workshops, seminars, and conferences. We are also expanding the local planning handbook's online resources with a series of online tutorials and expert articles on all items related to comprehensive planning. We will be introducing new resources continuously, so you may want to check the online resources regularly. If you have any questions during this presentation, please post them by using the webinar's control panel. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we will answer as many of your questions as possible. During the presentation, you may want to keep the control panel open so you receive any announcements made during the webinar. Also, there is a list of some useful resources for water resources planning available in the handout section of the webinar control panel that you can download. Today's session is water resources planning. We will be discussing the 3 water chapters required in the Comprehensive Plan, which include the Comprehensive Sewer Plan, the Local Surface Water Management Plan, and the Local Water Supply Plan. We will provide guidance about which communities need to complete which plan elements, the minimum requirements for each plan element, and additional efforts for a plan that go above and beyond the minimum requirements. Now I'd like to introduce you to the presenters for today's webinar. Kyle Colvin is an assistant manager in the Engineering Planning and Programs section of the Metropolitan Council Environmental Services Division, where he has worked for over 25 years. He is responsible for overseeing long-range regional wastewater system capacity planning and coordinating service requests reflected in community comprehensive sewer plans. Karen Jensen is an environmental analyst in the Water Resources Assessment section of MCES. Her primary responsibilities at the Council include serving on state and local technical advisory committees focused on water quality protection and improvement, reviewing environmental plans and documents, and planning and managing green infrastructure projects to improve regional water quality. Lanya Ross is a principal environmental scientist at the Metropolitan Council, where she has worked for over a decade providing water supply planning and technical assistance to communities. She was the project manager of the Master Water Supply Plan and the Council's primary technical resource to communities working to update their local water supply plans. Kyle, I'll turn it over to you to begin the presentation.
Thanks, Anna. And again, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone who is tuning in to listen to this webinar today. The Twin Cities metropolitan area enjoys a wealth of water resources, including 3 major river systems, the Mississippi, the Minnesota, and the St. Croix. It contains over 900 lakes and hundreds of miles of streams. The metropolitan area also includes groundwater reserves in regional aquifers, as well as shallow groundwater, which many times form crucial connections to surface waters, such as in the Vermilion River trout stream shown here. The Metropolitan Council is tasked with providing regional leadership in integrated water resources planning to ensure our waters are protected and support activities like fishing, swimming and boating, habitat and aesthetic viewing, and ensuring that the region's drinking water sources, including lakes, rivers, and groundwater aquifers, remain viable for future generations. Before I begin reviewing the wastewater plan requirements, I'd like to first step back and review how the current 2040 Water Resources Policy Plan is different from the previous 2030 Water Resources Management Policy Plan. The 2040 Water Resource Policy Plan consists of 3 areas of water resource related planning: wastewater, surface water, and water supply. In the 2030 policies, each area established individual goals and policies. most of which were not interrelated nor supportive of the other. The 2040 Water Resources Policy Plan, on the other hand, establishes policies and goals that are supportive of each other and strives to integrate each of the three water areas of the plan. Some examples of this integration includes policies that encourage surface and stormwater reuse for irrigation and treated wastewater reuse either directly or for groundwater recharge. Using such integrated practices can result not only in conserving water, which is an important resource, but in some cases can be more cost effective than using more traditional sources of water. The goal of the Council, through implementing this integrated water approach, is to take advantage of these potential opportunities. I will now be reviewing the comprehensive plan requirements that pertain to wastewater systems. In order to plan for and coordinate the provision of regional wastewater services within the 7-county metropolitan area, the Minnesota State Legislature passed Minnesota Statute Chapter 473, which includes numerous sections pertaining to the Council's responsibilities for regional wastewater planning, as well as local government responsibilities related to comprehensive planning. I'll be breaking down the wastewater plan requirements into two general categories. The first pertaining to wastewater plan requirements for communities that are served by the regional wastewater system. In some communities, this may include combinations of service through the regional wastewater system, private communal systems, and individual subsurface treatment systems, also referred to as SSTSs or septic systems. The other category pertains to wastewater plan requirements for communities that are not served by the regional wastewater treatment system. These may also include a combination of municipally owned wastewater treatment facilities, private communal systems, and individual SSTSs. There are also a number of communities in the region that are served entirely through individual SSTSs. These are typically townships. The requirements for those community plans regarding SSTSs are the same as those I'll be reviewing under the two separate categories previously mentioned. First, I'll be starting with communities that are served by the regional wastewater treatment system and those plan requirements. The regional wastewater collection and treatment system provides service to 109 communities within the 7-county metropolitan area. This service is provided through one of 8 regional wastewater treatment facilities and provides service to over 2.5 million people. In order to help plan for future service level needs, the Council relies on local community input through the comprehensive planning process. This local input includes adoption of local growth forecasts that are presented in the community's wastewater plan. The adopted community forecasts should be in 10-year increments out to the year 2040. The sewer forecast should be broken down into 2 categories: those households and employees that are served through the Council's wastewater system, and those that are unsewered and provided service through SSTSs. For overall plan update consistency, the sewered and unsewered forecast totals need to match the forecasts shown in the other elements or chapters of the plan. The wastewater plan also needs to include a sanitary sewer system map that depicts and provides relative information on the community's wastewater collection system. This information should include gravity sewers and their size, local lift stations and force mains and their size, future extensions of the local system, regional wastewater systems such as interceptors, lift stations, force mains, and meter stations if applicable. And the plan needs to also include identification of community system connection points to the existing metropolitan disposal system, any future connection points if applicable, intercommunity connections, and any changes in governmental boundaries based on existing orderly annexation agreements that are proposed. The community also needs to submit an electronic version of its community-wide wastewater system map. The electronic map can be in a GIS shapefile or AutoCAD DWG format. These maps should be submitted at the time of the final submittal of the community's overall plan update, but needs to reflect the final, most up-to-date map available and be consistent with the version included in the wastewater plan. The electronic map file also needs to include metadata pertaining to specific information covered under the previous slide. Here's a good example of a detailed sanitary sewer system map from Stillwater. The council can provide information to the community to assist in the development of their system map. The council has GIS datasets that include regional facilities and other features. Contact information for requesting this information is provided in the attached handout that you can download from the webinar's control panel. The wastewater plan needs to include information related to a community's wastewater collection system. This is typically presented in tabular form and includes the assignment of 2040 growth forecasts by Metropolitan interceptor connection point with corresponding flow projections in 10-year increments. The proposed time schedule for the construction of any new trunk sewer systems that require connections to the Metropolitan disposal system, and a breakdown of system capacity by hydraulic reach and design flows for existing community trunk sewers and their lift stations. If the community has any municipal treatment facilities, or if there are any privately owned treatment facilities, then the plan needs to identify the location and capacity of these facilities and include copies of National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System or state disposal system permits for any treatment facilities located within the community. The Council's long-term regional wastewater system plan is based on local community 2030 wastewater plans and reflect local service area expectations out to 2030. Thrive MSP 2040 and the 2040 Water Resources Policy Plan establishes the 2040 service area boundary in what was previously identified as the 2030 service area. This recognizes that growth between 2005 through 2010 was low and that there is still in most areas adequate undeveloped land within the 2040 service area to accommodate the region's growth for the next 20 years. It also emphasizes focused growth within that part of the region where regional wastewater infrastructure investments have already been made. The Council, using the last round of local wastewater staging plans, have either verified that adequate system capacity exists or has committed to make regional wastewater investments to accommodate growth out to 2030, or as I have just explained, out to 2040. Since the Council has verified its ability to provide service within the 2040 service area, the 2040 Water Resources Policy Plan does not specifically require that a community provide a wastewater staging plan as long as the community's plan reflects 2040 development to be kept within the regional 2040 service area. However, having such a wastewater staging plan can be beneficial from the community standpoint and that it allows for the advanced planning of infrastructure expansion and investment, resulting in the economical extension of services. Communities are strongly encouraged to include a wastewater staging plan that supports its vision for accommodating its growth. If the community's plan, however, reflects 2040 development to occur outside of the regional 2040 service area, the community's plan needs to provide a wastewater staging plan identifying the timing of the local system expansion. The Council will review this new information and reevaluate its ability to provide service consistent with the new staging plan. It is important to note that even if a community is not required to develop a wastewater staging plan, the land use plan does require a growth staging plan in its land use section. The plan needs to include fully executed copies of intercommunity service agreements that have been entered into after the community's 2030 plan update. Previously dated agreements were required to be included in the previous wastewater plan submittals. Every community that is provided regional wastewater service is required to include an inflow and infiltration, or I&I section, in their wastewater plan. This includes communities that have previously been assigned an I&I reduction work plan, or those who have not been assigned I&I reduction plans by the council. The I&I section needs to identify what steps the community is committing to take in reducing and prevent excess I&I from entering the local municipal and private wastewater collection system. The I&I plan needs to identify reduction goals, policies and strategies pertaining to the removal or prevention of excess I&I from entering the local and private collection system, and ordinances prohibiting the discharge and requiring the disconnection of foundation drains, sump pumps, and roof leaders to the sanitary disposal system. The I&I section should also quantify the amount of excess I&I within the community, identify sources, outline program priorities for mitigation activities, and an estimated cost for implementing the community's mitigation program. The I&I section should also identify funding sources available to fund these activities. The council recently convened an I&I task force consisting of local community representatives. The task force is currently reviewing the minimum requirements for a community's wastewater plan to satisfy the I&I section. A work group made up of task force members may recommend additional specific requirements regarding private property I&I activities to the council for action. It is anticipated that the council would act on any recommendations offered by the work group by October of this year. This may impact the specific information that a community's wastewater plan will need to include in its I&I section. Any updated requirements for the wastewater plan will appear in the local planning handbook. Now I will cover the wastewater plan requirements for communities that are not served by the regional wastewater treatment system. These are primarily covered under two groups, the first being those communities that do not have any centralized wastewater collection and treatment system and primarily rely on wastewater services being provided through SSTSs. Townships primarily fall under this group. The second being those communities that own and operate their own wastewater collection and treatment facilities. These are typically rural centers. For communities that own and operate their own wastewater collection and treatment systems, the wastewater plan needs to include the capacity of the treatment system and the existing and projected wastewater to the treatment system in 10-year increments to 2040. In the event that the existing treatment facility does not have sufficient capacity to accommodate the projected flows through 2040, as shown in this table for year 2040, then the wastewater plan needs to recognize this and state the community's intention to either increase the treatment facility's capacity or state the community's intent to request the council to regionalize the facility. If the community is planning a future wastewater treatment capacity enhancement, copies of any facility planning reports for the upgrading of the wastewater treatment plant should be included in the plan. The wastewater plan needs to include a sanitary sewer system map that depicts and provides relative information on the community's wastewater collection and treatment system. This map should contain the same information as those required for communities served by the regional wastewater system. Wastewater plans for communities not served by the regional wastewater system also need to include an I&I section. The I&I section needs to characterize the susceptibility of wet weather to the community's collection and treatment system and summarize its efforts to reduce and prevent excess I&I from entering their system. Some communities, both within and outside of the regional service area, have private treatment systems located within their jurisdiction. The wastewater plan needs to include a map showing the locations of existing public and private treatment systems, if any, including packaged treatment plants and communal on-site systems. Include a description of conditions under which private community treatment systems would be allowed. For example, would the community allow packaged treatment plants and communal drain fields within its jurisdictions? If so, under what conditions? The plan needs to include land uses that would be allowed to be served by private treatment systems, installation requirements, management requirements, and what local government responsibilities would the community accept in the ownership, operation, or maintenance of such facilities. And finally, there are approximately 75,000 individual SSTSs in the 7-county metropolitan area. As I said earlier, many of these are located within townships. However, some are located within communities that are provided centralized wastewater service through either the regional wastewater system or through a community collection and treatment system. In those instances where a community has SSTSs and a centralized wastewater system, the wastewater plan needs to include a GIS-based map identifying the location of SSTSs, or if the community cannot provide such a map, the council will accept a list of addresses which identifies where these facilities exist. This is an example of a map in Woodbury's 2030 plan that geographically identifies the location of all SSTSs within its community. The wastewater plan for all communities having SSTSs needs to show the location or give the addresses of known non-conforming system or system with known problems, show that your management program for SSTSs is in compliance with MPCA 7080 rules, and include a copy of the community's current SSTS ordinance. If the community relies on the county in which it is located within to administer its SSTSs program, then the wastewater plan needs to state this fact. That concludes my presentation on the requirements of the wastewater plan. I'll now be turning the presentation over to Karen, who will be reviewing the requirements of the surface water plan.
Thank you, Kyle. In this portion of the webinar, I will cover the requirements, the submission and review process, and discuss some potential enhancements for your community's local water plan. In order to protect and restore metropolitan area waters, the Minnesota State Legislature has passed legislation which specifies that the Metropolitan Council will review and comment on both watershed management organization plans, as well as community local water plans prepared as part of the comprehensive plan process. My topic today is the requirements for preparation and submission of local water plans by all cities and townships within the 7-county metropolitan area. Local water plans are often also called surface water management plans, comprehensive water management plans, or local stormwater management plans, for example. Each local government unit within the 7-county metropolitan area with land planning authority, including all cities and townships, must complete a local water plan and submit as a chapter of the final local comprehensive plan. Several documents should be consulted during local water plan preparation, including the relevant watershed management organization plan, or plans, since a number of cities and townships are covered by multiple watershed management organizations. The City of Minneapolis is a good example. Portions of it lie within Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, Bassett Creek Watershed Management Commission, Mississippi Watershed Management Organization, and Shingle Creek Watershed Management Organization. Minnesota Rules Chapter 8410 may also be of use to you and can be downloaded online. The Council's Local Planning Handbook is an online resource containing information about required plan contents, as well as enhancements that will make your plan more useful to your community. And finally, the Metropolitan Council's 2040 Water Resources Policy Plan includes information on required plan elements, as well as potential plan enhancements to maximize the effectiveness of the plan in your community. Web links for all these resources are included in the references handout associated with this webinar. A few changes to required plan elements have occurred since the last round of comprehensive planning due to the 2015 update of the 8410 rules. For example, an analysis of financial impact to implement the local plan is no longer required. The local water plan needs to be included in its entirety as a chapter or appendix within the final comprehensive plan. And the most important change is that all local water plans must be updated after December 31st, 2016 and prior to December 31st, 2018. A community's 2040 comprehensive plan will be deemed incomplete for review if the local water plan is not included with a submission or has not been submitted previously. And please note that after 2018, local water plans will be updated on the same schedule as the comprehensive plans. Let's quickly review the most important elements of local water plan submission, review, and approval. First, the 8410 rules require that local water plans must be submitted concurrently to both the Metropolitan Council and to the appropriate watershed management organization or organizations for a community. The Council then has 45 days to review the plan and submit comments to the watershed. The watershed then has 60 days from date of submission to review the plan, consider the Council's comments, and then either approve or disapprove the plan. A copy of the Council's comment letter will also be sent to your community. The plan can be submitted to the Council anytime after December 31st, 2016 through December 31st, 2018, either as a separate document or part of your comp plan. The Council's Local Planning Handbook has detailed information on formatting and electronic submission. Any additional questions about the submission or review process should be directed to me or Joan Mulcahy, and our emails are included on the reference sheet that's included with this webinar. In the past, many communities have included a summary of their local water plan in the comp plan and then have submitted the local water plan separately. In this round of comp planning, your city's final comprehensive plan submittal must include the local water plan in its entirety as a chapter or appendix. Your community should feel free to prepare a summary of the local water plan if it is of use to you. However, the Council needs the entire local water plan to be submitted as part of the comprehensive plan. Some material in the local water plan may be adopted by reference from the appropriate watershed plan. Each watershed plan is required to state to what extent a member community may adopt the watershed organization management plan by reference. Communities should look to the appropriate watershed plan for specific guidance. There are a number of local water plan content items that are required by statute. First, every local water plan must include an executive summary which summarizes highlights of the plan. Information presented can include a map of the city, identification of primary issues addressed in the plan, the main goals of the plan, and major actions recommended by the plan. The plan must also include a summary of water resources related agreements that have been entered into by the community. For example, joint powers agreements, maintenance agreements, and water resources grant agreements. The plan must include descriptions of the existing and proposed physical environment and land use. Drainage areas and the volumes, rates, and paths of stormwater runoff must be defined. Proposed land use information should be consistent with that included within the comprehensive plan. Using the City of Egan's last plan as an example, they included information on climate and precipitation, soils and topography, existing and proposed land use, and drainage areas. Your plan will be most useful to your community if information beyond the minimum requirements is included. For the requirement element of including a description of existing and proposed physical environment and land use, we encourage you to include as much information needed, both mapped and narrative, to guide your community's management of its specific surface water challenges and assets. This slide indicates just a few ideas of additional information that may be helpful to your community for this required element. Another required plan element is an assessment of existing or potential water resources related problems. The assessment should include a prioritized list of both water quantity or flooding problems and water quality problems. Some examples include areas of standing water after large storms, erosion-prone areas including streambanks, gullies, and ravines, or water bodies with algae blooms or odor problems. The assessment must also include a list of impaired waters within the city as shown on the most recent MPCA 303D list of impaired waters, which can be found on the MPCA website. The web link is included in the resources handout. The required assessment of existing or potential water resources related problems can be enhanced to be more useful to your community's individual water issues. Some examples of enhancements include an explanation of how your community is or intends to be involved in the development of total maximum daily load studies, also known as TMDLs, for any impaired waters within your community. Watershed restoration and protection strategies, also known as RAPS, are larger studies that will incorporate future TMDL work in Minnesota. For areas in the community where RAPS are planned, you may want to provide an explanation of how the community is or intends to be involved in the development of the RAPS. If a RAPS or TMDL study has been completed for a water body within your community, and your community has been given a waste load allocation, you may want to include implementation strategies, including funding mechanisms, that will allow your community to carry out the requirements and recommendations directed to them in the RAPS or TMDL. If your community has a designated trout stream, you may want to identify actions in your plan to address the thermal pollution effects that may occur from development. Finally, if your community has special waters, such as outstanding resource value waters, you may want to include information on how the community will meet state requirements for development near these waters. One of the most important required elements of the local water plan is a local implementation program describing non-structural, programmatic, and structural solutions to the problems identified within the plan. An example of a non-structural solution is street sweeping, while an example of a programmatic solution is training staff on de-icer application. Example of structural solutions include construction of infiltration basins or restoration of stream channels. The implementation program should also clearly differentiate the responsibilities of your community from those of your watershed management organization or organizations for carrying out implementation components. The local implementation program should also include areas and elevations for stormwater storage, as well as water quality protection methods adequate to meet performance standards or goals established in the watershed plan. The local implementation program must also include a description of official controls or ordinances. Examples include erosion and sediment control ordinances, wetland ordinances, shoreline ordinances, buffer ordinances, and volume control ordinances. Local official controls must be enacted within 6 months of adoption of the local water plan. The local implementation program must also include a table that briefly describes each component of the implementation program, including the schedule, estimated cost, and funding sources for each implementation component, including annual budget totals. The implementation program must also include a capital improvement table that sets forth by year the schedule, estimated cost, and funding sources for each contemplated capital improvement. Each local water plan must also include amendment procedures for the plan. Local water plan amendments may be minor or major. Minor amendments generally do not need to go through the agency review process. We suggest you consult the 8410 rules for more specific information. The Council's Water Resources Policy Plan and the Local Planning Handbook contain multiple strategies for enhancing your local water plan to better meet your water management goals. The Council will be holding a free one-day conference on December 13th, 2016 at the Earl Brown Heritage Center in Brooklyn Center, focused on multiple aspects of enhancing comprehensive plans. More information will be provided at that event on enhancing your local water plan. For now, I'll leave you with a few more examples of potential enhancements for your plan, including identifying locations and a maintenance schedule for all best management practices within your community, or using NOAA Atlas 14, Volume 8, which is also known as the Precipitation Frequency Atlas of the United States, to calculate precipitation amounts and runoff rates. Identifying the designated local government unit administering the Wetland Conservation Act in your community. Adopting the MPCA Minimal Impact Design Standards, which are also known as MIDS, volume performance goals, and flexible treatment options. Recommending use of the MPCA's Minnesota Stormwater Manual to provide guidance on best management practice design, construction, and maintenance. And MS4 communities should consider including a brief summary of their SWIP, which is also known as a Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, and a link to it in their plan. That's it for me. I'm now going to turn it over to Lanya for an overview of water supply planning.
Thank you, Karen. To ensure sustainable water supply for the region's current and future generations, we need to plan for wastewater, surface water, and we need to better integrate water supply planning with land use and resource planning. Today, I'll share some information that can help both communities with and without public water supplies to develop local comprehensive plans that protect the integrity of the region's water supply and the quality and quantity of water resources. I'll cover the minimum requirements for water supply planning, including resources to help you meet those minimum requirements. And I'll provide some ideas, resources, and examples that can help you go above and beyond the minimum requirements. All communities in the metropolitan area should address water supply in their comprehensive plans in some fashion. However, a local water supply plan is required for all communities within the metropolitan area with a municipal public water supply system. Completing a water supply plan fulfills 3 agency requirements, including 1, Metropolitan Council requirements to address water supply in local comprehensive plans, 2, Department of Natural Resources requirements to complete a public water supply plan, including demand reduction measures, and 3, Department of Health requirements to address contingency planning for water supply interruption. Completing a local water supply plan is also required to be eligible for funding requests to the Minnesota Department of Health for the Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund. So there are multiple benefits to completing a local water supply plan. To make this process easier, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources and the Metropolitan Council have jointly developed a local water supply plan template, which can be downloaded from the DNR website along with instructions and a helpful checklist. The template is just one change to water supply planning since the last round of comprehensive plans. A more streamlined review process has also been developed between Metropolitan Council and the Department of Natural Resources. The due date for the local water supply plan has also been changed to better align with the comprehensive plan schedule. This change will ensure that the information in the local water supply plan is consistent with the rest of the comprehensive plan. This helps to resolve one of the biggest challenges in the last round of planning, where population forecasts in the local water supply plans were usually inconsistent with the rest of the comprehensive plan because of mismatched water supply and comp plan deadlines. Finally, regional water supply policies have been improved to better support comprehensive planning that promotes sustainable water supplies. Those new policies are reflected in the revised template, and the updated Master Water Supply Plan provides information and guidance. Minimum requirements for water supply planning vary across the region. Over 100 communities in the region are served by municipal public water supplies, colored blue on this map. Other communities get all of their water from private wells, colored in white on this map. The rest of this discussion will provide more detail about how these different types of communities develop and submit water supply plan information, what information is required, and how additional information can enhance a plan beyond the minimum requirements. I'll begin with communities with municipal public water supplies. For those communities, a local water supply plan template must be completed and submitted to both the Metropolitan Council and to the Department of Natural Resources. Submittal can be done once using MPARS, Minnesota DNR's permitting and reporting system. This is the online permit reporting system that communities with municipal public water supplies use to submit their annual water appropriation permit information to the DNR. Once the review process is complete, Metropolitan Council staff will include it with the rest of the comprehensive plan, and DNR will move forward with approval of the plan. Your local DNR hydrologist, or hydro, will be the main point of contact and the coordinator of the DNR Council review process. East Metro Communities will work with Jennifer Sorensen, North Metro Communities with Kate Drury, South Metro Communities with Jenny Skanke. They will share the local water supply plan with Metropolitan Council staff, and they will work with the community or public water supplier to address questions and concerns. However, Metropolitan Council staff are also available to assist as needed. Call or email me if you have water supply questions related to the Metropolitan Council, or how local water supply planning links to the comprehensive plan. For 53 metro area communities shown on this slide, the local water supply plan is due by October 31st of 2016, this year. 23 communities plans are due by December 31st of 2017. And finally, 28 communities plans are due by December 31st of 2018. This schedule ensures that the local water supply plans are due on or before the same date that the rest of the comprehensive plan is due to the Metropolitan Council. Minimum requirements for those communities with municipal public water supplies include 1. Submitting the completed template through DNR's Permitted Reporting System, MPARS. 2. Including extended water demand projections out to 2040 that are based on the population forecasts in your community's system statement. This information should be included in Table 7 of the Local Water Supply Plan template. And 3. Including information about water supply sources by incorporating water supply maps from your system statement or from your community page of the Local Planning Handbook. You may also provide information about plans to evaluate or implement wastewater or stormwater reuse. This type of information should be included in Tables 8, 10, and in Section 4D of the Local Water Supply Plan template. Communities without public water supplies do not need to fill out the Local Water Supply Plan template. However, these communities should still include information about water supply sources by incorporating water supply maps from your system statement. This information should be included in appropriate places in the comprehensive plan, and those are due to Metropolitan Council by December 31st, 2018. The next 3 slides will illustrate the type of water supply information found in those community system statement maps. Your comprehensive plan should acknowledge surface water features and their interaction with the regional groundwater system. For example, areas where surface waters are likely to discharge water into the regional groundwater system, shown in light green on this map, could be discussed in relation to stormwater management. Stormwater management best practices, such as rain gardens or infiltration basins or swales, may need special consideration in certain areas. Protecting water quality in these areas is likely to provide a benefit to groundwater quality as well as surface water quality. Comprehensive plans should also acknowledge information provided by groundwater level monitoring and aquifer testing, if this information is available. Areas with no information about groundwater levels or aquifer properties, those areas that are far away from the dots on this map, may be prioritized in local or county plans or projects to fill in information gaps. This type of information can support efforts to better understand and manage groundwater-supported surface waters like trout streams, calcareous fens, or certain lakes and wetlands. It can also help water resource managers evaluate the design of stormwater infiltration practices. See the Minnesota Stormwater Manual discussion regarding flexible treatment options for guidance in these challenging areas. Finally, comprehensive plans should include information about regulatory and water supply management areas, in orange on this map, so that land use planning is done in a way that does not increase the vulnerability of drinking water to contamination. The handout attached to this presentation includes links to online guidance from the Minnesota Department of Health and the Pollution Control Agency. All communities can get more out of their plans by including information about planned actions that promote better water efficiency through conservation and reuse, protect source water areas, and support collaboration with neighbors. The Metropolitan Council and partner agencies have developed many useful resources, which are listed in the Water Supply Planning section of the Local Planning Handbook and are included in the attached handout. There are also many great examples of effective water supply planning across the Metro. We encourage you to address water conservation throughout your comprehensive plan. Identify opportunities in your community for land use, behavioral, or engineering changes that could be made to reduce water use. Consider conducting an analysis of where water is used in your community, the financial, regulatory, and cultural barriers to installing low water use landscapes or to conserving or reusing water in your community, and look for opportunities to promote water efficiency and reuse in the community. Explore and support water conservation and efficiency programs such as incentives, ordinances, education and outreach, or other approaches. The Metropolitan Council's Water Conservation Toolbox can support these efforts. The Minnesota Technical Assistance Program, MNTAP, is another good resource, particularly for working with individual businesses or industries. Eden Prairie provides an excellent example of how to implement a community water conservation program. Since 2000, Eden Prairie has offered rebates for residents to promote water conservation. As one of the oldest conservation programs in the region, Eden Prairie has tested different rebates, and they have learned what works and what doesn't in their community. For example, they once offered rebates for dishwashers, but found higher demand for rebates on other appliances that provided more water savings. Their program has evolved over time. To enhance source water protection, acknowledge potential water supply issues. Results of a regional screening are reported for your community in Appendix 1 of the Master Water Supply Plan. Determine if available local information is adequate to verify those potential water supply issues, and plan to work with partners to collect and share information that improves understanding about your water supplies. Finally, collaborate with partners, including the Minnesota Department of Health, to support local actions that prevent the spread of contamination. Protecting source water areas is an important part of every community's planning. An example of a new approach to source water protection can be found in Burnsville. They are the first community in the metro area to more formally connect planning and zoning to source water protection. In 2015, they adopted a drinking water protection overlay district. Throughout this process, the city worked closely with property owners and concerned citizens, and they continue to solicit feedback from businesses and others about this new program. Because water does not follow political boundaries, water supply issues are often bigger than any one entity can address alone. In your comprehensive plan, we encourage you to identify and promote efforts to share information about water-related issues, to identify opportunities to partner on projects, and to ensure that your community's water supply planning needs are also supported by neighboring and overlapping plans, watershed plans, wellhead protection plans, neighboring local water supply plans, groundwater management area plans, and others. Examples of collaboration are common throughout the region. Communities often collaborate on water supply issues. Some have formal water supply system agreements with neighbors, such as the Joint Water Commission, which serves Crystal, Golden Valley, and New Hope. Other communities support one another on an as-needed basis through programs such as MNWARN, Minnesota's Water and Wastewater Agency Response Network. There are many other opportunities for collaboration, and Metropolitan Council supports planning that supports these approaches. The Council also provides staff to help facilitate various collaborative efforts. For example, sub-regional water supply work groups are active in several parts of the region. These groups, as well as other stakeholders, identify valuable tools and information that is needed to support sustainable water supply planning. For example, hearing the need for water conservation tools, the Council developed and maintains an online conservation toolbox, and a link to this toolbox can be found in the handout attached to this presentation. The Council also developed a stormwater reuse guide, which can be used to evaluate the benefits and challenges of a variety of stormwater reuse projects. This information informed the demonstration project at CHS Stadium, the St. Paul Saints Stadium in downtown St. Paul. The attached handout also includes a link to this stormwater reuse guide. For more information about water supply planning, please follow the PlanIt section of the local planning handbook for information about online tutorials, conferences, and fact sheets relating to water supply. I also invite you to call or email me with any questions you might have. With that, I'll turn this back to Anna.
Thank you, Lania. I have a few items I would like to mention before we begin the Q&A session. Here are a few of the links to resources that provide general guidance regarding the comprehensive plan update process. The Local Planning Handbook is a key resource for comprehensive plan updates. The handbook provides information on the minimum requirements of the plan and presents a variety of helpful tools and maps to make it easier to complete the minimum requirements. The PlanIt page is within the Local Planning Handbook and has the most current information available on upcoming events. It also includes notices for other regional events relating to comprehensive plan topics. The community pages are individual pages for each jurisdiction that is required to complete a comprehensive plan update. Each page presents requirements and information relating to your comprehensive plan update, such as sewer forecasts and maps relating to water resources planning. We now have time for a few questions. The first question that we have is, do we have to coordinate our sewer forecasts with our neighboring communities?
This is Kyle. No, each community is responsible for reviewing and planning or basing its plan on its forecasts. Through the review process, there is an adjoining community review element, but in terms of coordinating sewer forecasts, or any forecast for that matter, with neighboring communities, that's not a requirement.
Thank you, Kyle. The next question that we have is, do we need to address best management practice maintenance in our local surface water plan?
Thanks, Anna. This is Karen. That's a great question and one I'm very passionate about. It's actually a very pertinent topic right now because research at the University of Minnesota has shown that without maintenance, many management practices, which we also call BMPs, best management practices, lose their effectiveness at both pollutant removal and stormwater volume reduction if they're not maintained. We recommend that every community identify the management practices within its boundaries and develop a program to inspect and maintain those practices. And I would say that additional support may be available from your watershed management organization for maintenance activities. And as well, the Minnesota Stormwater Manual provides a great deal of information about maintenance of different activities or different practices that you may have on your landscape. So the quick answer to the question is no, including maintenance of best management practices is not required in your plan, but the Met Council does recommend including a maintenance program with your plan.
Thank you, Karen. The next question pertains to water supply. If we serve less than 1,000 people, do we have to complete a water supply plan?
Thanks, Anna. This is Lania. If you are in the metropolitan area and you have a municipal public water supply, yes, you do need to complete a local water supply plan template, even if your population is less than 1,000 people.
Thank you. The next question we received is there a specific date deadline for the sanitary sewer update? The only specific date I noted was October 31st, 2016 for my city for water supply.
Yes, this is Kyle. In terms of the wastewater plan is to be included with the overall plan update submittal. So officially the deadline for that is December 31st, 2018. So it's consistent with the overall update deadline requirement.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next question is, what will happen if my comprehensive plan does not include one of these required plans?
May I jump in? This is Lania.
Sure.
We have had this issue before in the last round of planning because of the disconnect between the water supply plan and the local comprehensive plan. And so for water supply, if you do not include your local water supply plan as part of the full comprehensive plan, it will be deemed incomplete until that local water supply plan is submitted.
And this is Karen. I'll also chime in and say that if the local water plan is not included in the final comprehensive plan in its entirety as a full chapter or appendix, with the deadline of December 31st, 2018, your plan will also be deemed incomplete.
Yeah. And I would also add, just to make this kind of a trifecta, is that if any element, if any required element of the wastewater plan, and for that matter, really any section of the plan, isn't included, it will be determined as being incomplete, and then the community will be given an opportunity to include that information on a subsequent submittal.
Okay. Somewhat related to the last question, are you available to meet one-on-one with my community to guide us on developing our local water plan?
This is Lanya. When you say local water plan, I'm a little unclear if you mean the local water supply plan or the surface water plan, but I'll answer for the water supply component of that. If you do want assistance in completing that local water supply plan, have questions about some portion of it, we would be happy to come and meet with you and coordinate with DNR as well on any questions you might have.
And this is Karen Jensen. And I would say the same thing. I work closely with Joe Mulcahy. We share our job. Both of our emails are available on the resource sheet. We would be happy to come and meet with your community. And a good approach, a good collaborative approach, I would put it maybe, is we would happy to meet with you perhaps at your watershed district headquarters so that we can all talk about the expectations for the plans and get those on the table, make sure everybody's clear on what's required, and you'd be well on your way.
Thanks, Karen. The next question is, how can I find out if the Metropolitan Council has water quality data for streams or lakes in my community?
This is Karen. That's a great question and really pertinent right now because the Metropolitan Council has a environmental data management system, and we call it EIMS, which stands for Environmental Information Management System. The EIMS is located on the Council's website, and we are currently in the process of revamping the EIMS, and the expected product will be available probably early fall, so maybe in September. We anticipate the revamped EIMS system will be much more user-friendly. We'll have maps, it'll be more interactive, and so typically the type of information that you would be able to find on the EIMS would be water quality information about lakes in your community, because the Metropolitan Council has a citizen-assisted management, I have to get my words straight, the Citizen-Assisted Monitoring Program, also known as CAMP. So many communities in the metropolitan area have volunteers that are collecting data on the lakes, and those would be included in EIMS. For those communities that have a stream running through their community, the council monitors over 21 different stream systems within the metro. If we do monitor the stream system in your community, the data would also be available there. And I would be happy to answer any specific questions about data requests if you just want to email me.
Thank you, Karen. The next question is, my WMO is just starting the update of its management plan. If the update is not completed by the end of 2018, do I wait to update the local water plan?
This is Karen. And that's a good question, and one that I haven't heard before. But what I would say is your plan does need to be done by the due date of December 31st, 2018. And I would suggest that, number one, you have a conversation with your watershed district to see where they're at and what their deadline will be. And perhaps it would be a good idea in your situation for the Metropolitan Council, you and the watershed district to sit down at a table and just discuss the expectations for your plan. I'm just going to sort of take a flyer on this, though, and say that it's the approved watershed plan that is most appropriately used to guide your community's plan. So if your watershed management organization is in the midst of updating its plan, you probably will want to use the already approved plan. But to contact me and we can go through your specific situation and sort of parse out the details.
Thank you. We had a request for confirmation of the local water supply plan due dates. It appears that the DNR website presents conflicting dates with what we had. So, Lania, can you check in on that, and we can include that in the Q&A document?
We will definitely update that and make sure that they are consistent. My sincere apologies, and we will get correct information out as soon as possible.
Sounds good, thank you. The next question is, what if my community doesn't have an electronic sanitary sewer system map?
Yes, there's actually a few communities out there that kind of fall in that category. First of all, the council has GIS data sets that is available to provide to local communities to help build that GIS map. Some of that data includes regional facilities, which we want to be depicted on the local system maps as well. We also have the council has other data sets through Metro GIS that's available. We can make that available, at least within the limits of any licensing agreements we might have. So we also, in those communities, last go around under the 2030 plan submittals, we had a few communities where all that was available were hard copy, paper copy type maps, and the council did go through and just digitize some of those schematics into our GIS system, so we can also make that available to communities as well.
Thanks, Kyle. I have a follow-up question. What if my community doesn't have a SSTS map?
Pretty much the same thing applies here. As I indicated during the presentation, the council, in lieu for communities that have a combination of some centralized wastewater service and SSTSs, we will accept addresses for those properties that are served by SSTSs. In communities like townships that do not have any service through a centralized system, whether it's regional or local, what the council will do is either get a list of addresses from the county if they have the authority for SSTSs in that community, or the council is also going to go through the process of identifying SSTSs based on county parcel data.
Thank you. The next question is, do we need to include the city's SWIP in the local water plan?
Oh, this is Karen. That's a great question. I'll remind everyone at first that SWIP is spelled SWPPP, and it stands for the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. And it is required of MS4 communities, and MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System cities, and which are identified by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. So inclusion of your SWIP is not an official requirement in the local water plan, but it would enhance your plan to include a summary of the SWIP and perhaps a web link. I think I had a slide about that earlier in my presentation. I think it would be a good tie-in with you have your SWIP plan as one plan and your local water management plan. It's nice to have the two tied together so that your goals and your implementation strategies are aligned.
Thank you. The next question relates to water supply. What if our community completed a water supply plan in the last few years?
If your community has completed a water supply plan in the past few years, it will still need to be updated. We want to make sure that those local water supply plans are reflecting the most current statutory requirements for water demand reduction programs, for example, and they also will need to include water demand projections out through 2040 to be consistent with the local comprehensive plan. Other portions of your local water supply plan may be very easy to update. It may be a lot of the same information just taken from your existing plan and put into the new template. If you'd like to talk about this in a little more detail, feel free to email me and we can meet about this if there are additional questions. But we are looking for those templates to be updated, again, to reflect statutory requirements that have changed and also the new projections.
Thank you. A question for Karen. Is EIMS offline now?
Oh, so that's a good follow-up question to the one I just answered about our EIMS, which again stands for Environmental Information Management System. And I think this question follows up on the fact that I said we're revamping the system now. But the old system is still up and operational. And so if you have used our old EIMS webpage and system to download data, that's still there, still going, so feel free to use it. I think everyone will be very pleased with the update, however, coming out later this fall.
Thank you. Wastewater question is up next. Is sewer staging a requirement for the plan?
No. In some communities, no. The last round of comp plans, communities projected out or staged growth out to what was then 2030. And as I explained, the long-term wastewater plan and Thrive 2040 for that matter, essentially froze the 2030 service area boundary out to 2040. And that recognized the fact that the region saw very little growth in that 6-year period between the last update and now. It also recognizes and acknowledges that there are a lot of undeveloped land areas within the 2040 service area, long-term service area. So if a community's plan for growth is contained within what is now the 2040 use of boundary, the council's already gone through the last round to verify that we either have adequate system capacity to accommodate growth in those areas or has already programmed capital improvements to provide additional capacity in those areas. So in those cases where a community is not planning to extend its growth beyond the 2040 boundary, then the community is not required to have a staging plan. However, converse to that, if the community is proposing to extend growth beyond what we've delineated as the 2040 service area, then yes, they do have to identify those areas outside of the 2040 service area and then identify the timing of that expansion and the type of development they proposed using their land use plan.
Thank you. Next, another water supply question. If a community gets water from another water supplier, who needs to submit a water supply plan?
Thanks, Anna. That is a good question. If a city or water supplier is buying water in bulk from another water supplier and then billing its customers, that city will need to complete a water supply plan. There's a couple of different variations on this question. And another option would be if residents of, say, city number 1 are getting their water from city number 2, and city number 2 is handling all the billing and the metering, then city number 1 doesn't need to complete a local water supply plan. City number 2 will need to be accounting for these customers in their water supply plan, if that makes sense. Now, if city number 1 runs their own water supply system, but some portion of that city is served by city number 2, some neighborhood, for example, is served by a separate water supply system, then each city should only complete the portions, really only plan for the portions that they serve, if that answers that question. If you are unsure and you'd like to have a couple more questions, I recommend following up with me, contacting your DNR Hydro, or contacting Joe Richter, who is at the DNR. He serves the metro area, and his contact information is online, and we'll provide that in the questions that we post with this webinar as well.
Thanks. Kyle, relating that to wastewater, if my community provides sanitary sewer service to another community, do I need to include that area of the other community in our sewer forecasts?
Oh, that's a good question, because actually it relates to, I think, the very first question that I addressed. As I stated earlier, a community is only responsible for including in its forecasts the household and employment that is contained within its boundaries. So no, if a community, if an outside area of a community, if an area outside of a community, which is in another community, is served incoming, if flow is coming into that community, they do not need to include those forecasts in their comprehensive sewer plan. However, many of these inter-community service areas are covered by a joint powers agreement or an inter-community agreement. And many of those inter-community agreements do stipulate limits or levels of service that can be accommodated or accepted by the receiving community. So it is important. I think the first question talked about coordination of sewer forecasts. In regards to the inter-community service areas, yes, there should be some coordination of sewer forecasts to verify that, one, it's either consistent with that inter-community agreement, or two, highlights the need to amend that agreement to accommodate any changes in that level of service between the two communities. That's a good question.
Thanks. Next, a local surface water question for Karen. What funding sources are available for surface water implementation projects?
That's a good question again, and probably could talk all day about that in using many acronyms. But to make it short, there's a few ways that you can fund implementation projects. One common way in the metropolitan area has been to adopt a stormwater utility fee by communities. Many communities have adopted these fees, and what they typically are looking at the amount of runoff that a typical type of land use would produce, and then charging a fee based on that volume expected to be produced. So residential areas are typically charged one type of fee. Industrial areas might be charged another type of fee because they're typically larger with much more paved surface, so they produce more runoff. A good example of a stormwater utility fee would be to look to the city of Roseville. They were one of the early adopters of the stormwater utility, and have made good use of it. The stormwater utility fees have typically been used by cities for construction and maintenance of their stormwater sewer service, but also to construct and maintain best management practices that reduce the volume of stormwater going into their system or reduce the number of pollutants going into their system as well. So stormwater utility is one avenue. Second, thanks to the Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendment and the Clean Water Fund, there are several grant programs that are available to communities, and especially to communities with approved local water plans. For that one, I suggest looking at the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources website, and that agency is also known as Bowser. For more information, they operate a number of the grant programs. You may also want to check with the Pollution Control Agency for additional grant programs. And your watershed district may also provide additional funding to help with implementation projects. And if you have questions about any of these funding mechanisms, just shoot me an email and I'll provide some web links or help you answer that question.
Thanks, Karen. Lanya, another question for you. What is the process for review and approval of the water supply plan?
Thank you. This is going to be a joint process to review these local water supply plans between the Metropolitan Council and the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. So step one will be submitting your local water supply plan through the MPARS website. And again, this website is one that is also used to submit your annual water use information for the water appropriation permit to DNR. So same location. Your area hydrologist then at the DNR will be receiving an automatic notification of this new posting. There's a new plan to review, and they will review the plan for initial completeness. And if it's a metro area plan, so one of the ones we're talking about today, it will then get forwarded on to the Metropolitan Council for our review. The area hydrologist, again, is going to be the main contact for the community and the public water supplier. Met Council staff will be reviewing those plans, DNR will be reviewing those plans, and if there are any questions or any concerns, the DNR hydrologist will be the one to share those with the community and address those. Or they'll also be, if there are no concerns, the ones to share a letter of approval. That information is then shared with the Metropolitan Council as well. If there are no changes made to the plan and it's complete and consistent with the population forecast, for example, going out to 2040, it would be considered complete for inclusion with the local comprehensive plan. DNR is the agency to approve the local water supply plans. So once they've approved that local water supply plan, your city is then required to adopt the plan, and there's a certification of plan adoption template on the DNR website, the same place that you have different links for the local water supply plan template. There are some instructions and a checklist. Some other frequently asked questions about the local water supply plan are there as well. So once that certificate of plan adoption is ready, that will be posted in MPARS along with the permit information and the local water supply plan. So I hope that covers most of the questions with that, but DNR and council staff are happy to follow up and add more detail as needed.
Hey, thank you. Kyle, question for you. In terms of generating flow projections for our wastewater plan, what's an appropriate assumption for flow per household or flow per capita?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's actually a question that we get asked a lot. And the council a few years ago actually did a regional-based study on what we were seeing for residential equivalent connection flow generation and also per capita flow generation rates. And what we found regionally was approximately a little bit less than 180 gallons per household, which equated to about 85 gallons per capita. Now that does vary pretty widely between communities. Things that influence that, of course, are household size for one thing, but also if a community has a large industrial component too, that'll have a tendency to kind of skew that that flow per household and capita numbers. What I would suggest is that the council has a lot of wastewater flow data that it collects through one of 170 some odd flow meters, and we can make that information available to communities. We have listed on the handout a contact person that can get that information from. And then also any other, we have other data sets too that might help assist communities to get a better handle on what the flow generation rate. I would also add that regionally speaking, we see on average about 800 gallons per acre per day. Again, that varies widely, of course, from downtown Minneapolis to very suburban type communities, but on average it's about 800 gallons per acre per day.
Thanks, Kyle. This will be the last question we have time for. Kyle, can you just discuss what's meant by a Tier 2 sewer plan?
Oh my. Well, it's a term that it refers to really the sewer chapter that and the requirements of the sewer chapter that predates the merger of the council and the requirements of the overall comprehensive plan that was delineated in the Land Planning Act, and then the specific requirements of the Sewer Act for the wastewater plants. And really, other than us old timers, the term Tier 2 really doesn't mean a whole lot. You'll actually notice that in this presentation I specifically didn't use the term Tier 2, but what it refers to is the more detailed information requirements that were under the old Sewer Act when the wastewater plan was actually separate from the overall land use plan. After the merger of the agencies and the last go around, we actually just required the level of detail in the overall comp plan update. So it really is a term that we're really kind of hoping to retire because now the requirements are the wastewater plan requirements. It really isn't pertinent anymore.
Thanks for clarifying that, Kyle. I'd like to remind everyone that if we did not get to your question today, you can still contact Kyle, Lanya, or Karen. They would all be happy to answer your questions directly if you'd like to email them. I'd like to mention a few logistics for our participants and pass on information regarding some upcoming events. Please join us for the next presentation in the PlanIt Basics webinar series. On August 18th, Mark Philippi and Cole Henniker will be presenting a transportation overview covering the minimum local comprehensive planning requirements for all transportation modes resulting from Thrive MSP 2040 and the 2040 Transportation Policy Plan. Registration is now open and available on the PlanIt page of the local planning handbook. Also, if you're interested in viewing the entire PlanIt schedule of events, it is available on the PlanIt page of the handbook. Please visit the page and register for upcoming webinars. If you'd like to review today's presentation, a video will be posted on the PlanIt page of the handbook. We will also provide a Q&A document that will include questions we answer today, as well as any questions that we didn't get to. We will also prepare an annotated PDF of the PowerPoint slides for the website, which will be posted within the next week or so. Finally, as you exit the webinar, there is a short 5-question survey. We would greatly appreciate any feedback you can provide. If you have any other questions or comments, please contact us. Thank you for joining us today and have a great afternoon.